So we talked about that. And I want to now say a few words about currency, because China has a managed currency. They've recognized a principle of greater currency flexibility, which is very, very important. And they're moving, but they're not moving, in my judgment, quickly enough. And so I remember talking with a senator who said, gee, I showed up in China, we talked about currency, and we agreed, and then they're not doing what they said they were doing. And I said, oh yeah, you just are missing the point, because you talk about currency flexibility, you're thinking, like I am, this much in this period of time, and they're thinking this much in this period of time. And, but I feel quite strongly there's a need to move more quickly in the short term, but we need to get to a point in the long term, or not the long term, but in the intermediate term, where China has a market-determined currency. And there are many countries in the world that don't have market-determined currencies, but China is by far the largest that doesn't have a market-determined currency, and they are a country that is very integrated into the global system in terms of trades and goods and services, but in terms of their capital markets and the currency, there aren't. And that in and of itself is a bit of an unnatural act. So as I've talked about currency with the Chinese and in this country, it is we need to do the things to get to the point where in the intermediate term, it is prudent and they're able to have a market-determined currency. And a big part of that is to have great capital markets, competitive capital markets, and that's why capital markets reform is so important. And I also say as you're driving toward capital markets reform, you need more flexibility in the currency and need to have a currency that's more reflective of the value. Otherwise, you won't get where you want to get with your capital markets. You won't be able to successfully reform your banks and other institutions because they need to be market-driven, and they'll only be market-driven if there are market signals and a currency that reflects the basic economic conditions. So that's why the reason I emphasize currency so much is, to me, this is a proxy for the path to reform and the pace of reform. And so much of the strategic economic dialogue, as far as I'm concerned, is about reforms post-WTO for China. Continuing, I look at WTO as sort of a minimum level, and the issue of compliance with WTO is something there'll always be arguments about that, and there are dispute resolution vehicles as part of that process. But the important thing for China's long-term economic development, and the thing all of us should be focused on because it's key to China's success, is going to be the path of reform post-WTO. So, in conclusion, let me say the strategic economic dialogue is something that all of us in the U.S. are taking very seriously. It's something that Wu Yi and her counterparts are taking very seriously. As I've looked at reform, I think time is of the essence. One of the lessons I've learned through the years is that although perhaps not as easy politically, it is better to implement reforms during periods of economic strength. The risks for China are greater, as far as I'm concerned, in moving too slowly rather than moving too fast. And it's much, much easier when things are going well to put some of these reforms in place. I'm confident also, because we have very good will on both sides, that our ongoing focused discussion with China through the SED will provide a stronger foundation for the economic relationship between our two countries while yielding tangible benefits for both of our countries in the short term. And let me, in conclusion, because I'd like plenty of time for questions here, say thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your outreach, because this relationship is so important, and I'm just a big believer in constructive engagement. The stronger the economic relationships we have between two countries, the better we'll know each other. We'll all have a bigger stake in economic stability, global stability, and knowing people on a face-to-face basis, knowing them personally makes a big difference. And so many of you are just great ambassadors and doing good work every day. So thank you for all you do. And Lulu, now I'll take some questions.
We actually have many questions for you. So.
No, I didn't say I'd take many questions. I said I'd take some questions.
Well, we know you have a very tight time schedule, so we will be respectful, but you are not surprised there are so many questions. One mentions that this morning, John Thornton, your former partner at Goldman Sachs, and currently professor and director of global leadership at Tsinghua University, inspired our gathering this morning by saying that he was hoping to devote his life from here on to building bridges between U.S. and China, much as the Committee 100 is planning to do. From your view, though, at the state level, how can people like John and ourselves pick up where the government leaves off in terms of building bridges between our two countries?
Let me say, and I don't want to in any way depreciate my efforts and the importance of the strategic economic dialogue, because I'm totally committed to it, and I think it's very important. But I think people in Washington tend to overestimate what they do relative to what gets done outside of Washington. And I would just simply say, I think that more important than anything I'm doing is the bridge building, the outreach, what I call the constructive engagement. One of the huge benefits of business is when you're doing business with people, you get to know them personally. You're spending time with China on a first-hand basis. You're not just reading about it in the paper. As students from the U.S., we've always had a lot of Chinese students in the U.S., more and more U.S. students in China. That makes a big difference, and because there's nothing like knowing the facts. And when I'm talking with people on the Hill, it's a lot easier for me to talk to those that have spent time in China and know it on a personal basis rather than just what they're reading. So again, I would say just keep doing what you're doing. Hopefully I'll make a difference, but long after I'm gone from this position, you'll still be doing what you're doing, and that'll make a bigger difference.
Thank you. And here is actually a related question. What are some opportunities for the U.S. and China to lead cooperatively outside of the economic sphere, and how?
Well, there are plenty of areas outside of the economic sphere. The U.S. and this is a multifaceted relationship. When you look at things that are outside, largely outside of my lane, I would say there's been very important progress on the six-party talks. And if this is successful this time, it'll be because it's done on a multilateral basis, and China is very involved. So there are many things outside of the economic. We're not going to solve, although I would say the environmental issue is an economic issue, I will say we're not going to solve this by ourselves, okay? This is a global issue. And so in today's world, there's very few important issues that can be solved just in the U.S. alone. So this is a multifaceted and important relationship.